So Tad,
Yeah.
you said that your deepest wound can help lead to your true niche, but my wounds are so deep that that's not where I necessarily want to focus the work I do. And it's like there's different levels of what I've dealt with that has brought me to working with the plants. And it sort of it sort of leaves me not quite knowing how to focus in. And there are so many different ways I could focus. And the one thing that I know from working with the plants is that whatever I do for the rest of my life has to involve the plants.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, of course, I don't have any answers on this one. Um, we're in the realm of the mysterious properly when we start talking about wounds and niche, and there's business considerations and all that. But uh, once we get into kind of more the life purpose thing, this is above my pay grade. So I just have to say that this is I just don't know, God, I'm 40, 45. So that's all I've got to offer is the view from 45 um, and from the life that I've had, which is probably much different than the life you've had. So I can't even imagine what you've been through and wouldn't ask. But I would say sometimes something I got from Jeffrey Van Dyke that seems useful is sometimes with the wound piece, it doesn't have to be directly the thing. So for example, somebody went through child abuse. Well, you don't necessarily have to work with people who were abused as children, but there might be a broader sense of abuse or injustice or unfairness. There might be a bigger umbrella that speaks to. Um, People who felt betrayed. It might just be I work with people who've been betrayed in their life by people they cared about or people in positions of power, and they don't ever have to say that they were, sexually abused as children. They may not ever want to say that, and yet it may appear in it. There's an author, Derek Jensen, and he wrote a book called A Language Older Than Words. He's written a number of books, and he's written about this in his books. He was abused by his father, sexually abused by his father, and his father also beat the rest of the family. And he there's a fellow I knew who was also was abused by his parents, and he was reading a different book of Derek Jensen's where he doesn't talk about his childhood. But we were talking, and I mentioned, oh, so Derek went through this as a child, and he sat back and he looked at me and he said, "I knew that. I could tell. I just knew that he'd shared that with me." So how did he know? It wasn't anywhere, but it was in between all the words. And so there's a kind of this is an implicit versus explicit thing that you can do with where you don't write about it, but you write as if it happened. You don't write about it, but you let the wake of the consequence of it infuse the writing. And you don't it's not the same painting, but it's the same colors. It's that type of thing. So I think that's very possible to do, to look at the wound and like, okay, the bullseye is too sensitive, but if I step out a few rings, yeah. And then as you speak about it, you can really tell, I'll tell you that you can really tell the difference between somebody who's a native and somebody who's a tourist. Somebody picks a niche like, oh, I help people who've been through abuse, but they've never been abused. It's palpably different the way they speak about it versus somebody who went through it themselves. In the same way that if somebody literally was a tourist in a country versus somebody who was raised there, they don't speak about it the same way. The tourist lacks a certain, and it's nothing wrong with being a tourist. It's just you don't go to the hardware store looking for bread. They just don't have that to offer. You don't expect it. So I don't know, that's what comes to me. I don't know how that lands for you.
That lands really well. And as I've taught all these different things of making different herbal crafts and herbal medicines and so on, what I discovered was that instead of addressing people, oh, you know, you've been abused, let me help you with the effects of being abused, I found that people were coming to my classes and finding solace and healing and working with their hands and making these things with the herbs. And I was like, oh my God, I'm bringing healing to people in a really different way. And it's not direct, but I feel like it brings healing, a form of healing to more people than I could ever have reached if I said, oh, let me help you with, you know, your abuse issues.
Well, and there could be. So what I'm hearing from you is a certain point of view that people working with their hands with nature can offer healing to things that maybe are unspeakable in a certain way. Yeah, there is that word. It's interesting to notice in English language, unspeakable. You can't speak it. I had friends who worked they did summer camps for gang youth, and they were, white kids from wherever they were from, California. And when they came back, I said, "What did you learn? How was that for you?" I mean, I couldn't even imagine. It's not a life I've ever known. And the thing that struck me the most, they said, the pain that they have, the rage is so immense that you can't go to it directly. You can't touch it directly. If you do, it's just volcanic. And this is why you get the spoken word and the art and the murals and the poetry, all of this. There's the old story of Medusa and Perseus, and lots of different versions of this and different angles. But basically, in one version of it, Perseus, he's in the labyrinth and Medusa's coming to get him. But if you look at Medusa, you turn into stone. And so, it echoes everywhere. And it's very hard to place where she is. And he doesn't want to turn around a corner, and there she is, and she's got him. And so he's got to keep track of her somehow. But if he peeks around the corner and sees her, but he can't do it through sound. So he takes his bronze shield and he holds it up, and he can see the reflection, and the reflection does not turn him to stone. Yeah. And so this is one of the ideas, that this is what art can be, is the reflection that obliquely lets you see the thing that you couldn't look at, because if you saw it, it would turn you to stone. And so I could just see you writing about this type of thing, of saying it's a marvel. Somehow, hands in the soil, working with our hands again, working with plants offers healing to these unspeakable things. I mean, I could see that being a theme where you don't even have to address what those things might be, though you could. But it's just, isn't it a miracle that somehow this works? That somehow we don't have to go into the well, too soon. But we can be given some kind of solace. It can be some sort of a balm for us. It can be um, giving us strength and working at metabolizing this in ways we couldn't have predicted, uh, imagined we deserved, or thought possible. But I see it all the time. That's a very compelling thing. So that could be talking about the bigger why. This could be one of the bigger whys, is the deeper healing that plants afford. Not just the working with it, but the wow, you ingest a plant, and you're not just ingesting a plant, you're ingesting wisdom. It's these plants are our elders, these bacteria and fungus, these are our ancestors. And somehow this kinship with them, you have the grandmothers and grandfathers, swaddling you, holding you. I think about a friend of mine who she had migraines. We were at the Bioneers conference in California, and she got asked to be the attaché for one of the 13 indigenous grandmothers. And she was warned this would be more difficult than it looked, because they were wily. And you're literally, your only job, get her to the session on time. This seems easy. Don't underestimate it. This will be impossible to get her there on time. And it was, she barely made it happen. But one night she was sitting next to this grandmother, and that migraine was there. And she was just in so much pain. And and also in pain in her heart, relationship stuff, and just the struggles of a young woman. And she just burst into tears, sobbing. And this grandmother they barely spoke the same language. She just saw this, and she scooched over in her bed. She's lying in bed, and she pulled back the blanket and just was like, And my friend came into bed and she just, but no talking about it, no discussing it. But somehow just being held was the thing. Anyway, somehow your beautiful sharing brought those memories back for me. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm crying because you've said it in a way, you've given me insight
Yeah.
into it.
You,
Thank
you,
you.
you writing about this will be a real blessing for people. Yeah, this will be real important for people to hear because a lot of people feel hopeless about this. It's too big, it's too dark. I can't open that can of worms, and so there's no healing possible for me. So
I
this,
know, I hear that so much.
yeah. And so that, I mean, this is literally can be the headline. This can be one of the things, you know, you open with. This can be one of the things you talk about often. This can be a theme in a lot of your posts. A different way to, you know, for healing. Why do we have to talk about it all the time? Why do we have to dredge it up? There's this, do you know Alberto Vildodo? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's this little meme I saw where his teacher said, he charged me for being a gardener. He said, you know how to weed all your negative thoughts all day, but you don't know how to make things burst into flower.